Welcome to Chapter 10. Prevention is separate from the treatment and recovery field, although there is obvious crossover. Substance abuse prevention has often been a misunderstood and neglected aspect in addressing the American drug problem. Historically, prevention has been a community practice, but in the last decade or so, the field has evolved into a specialty profession. Prevention efforts have shifted from scare tactics, the dangers and evils of drugs, to emphasis on the worth of people and the coping skills needed to avoid a destructive pattern of alcohol and drug dependence. The goal of prevention is to develop active, involved, empowered, and capable young people. This skill and leadership development is now supported by science-based or evidence-based prevention programs. This means practicing prevention in a way that is based on good science and is consistent with the results of scientific research. The Center for Substance Abuse Prevention, or CSAP, part of the federal government's Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, SAMHSA, provides a foundation of research and helps to define the work in the field. CSAP works with states and communities to develop comprehensive prevention systems that create healthy communities in which people enjoy a quality of life. This includes supportive work and school environments, drug and crime-free neighborhoods, and positive connections with family and friends. Modern substance abuse prevention is practiced through a diverse range of programs and activities that are based on limiting demand. These programs and activities are found at many levels in our society: individuals, families, selected groups, neighborhoods, whole communities, and whole populations. They are also delivered through many different channels: the media, schools, programs outside of schools, faith-based organizations, and community-wide prevention programs. Programs and activities follow a variety of strategies and take many forms, which you will learn in this chapter. Here are the learning objectives. For years, society has searched for easy ways to prevent drug dependence and addiction. Scare tactics proved to be an ineffective prevention strategy. Much of the information was invalid, exaggerated, and overgeneralized, causing young people to question the credibility of the program. Adolescence is a time of questioning and exploration. The information provided in these approaches was not geared to the sensitivity of young people. It insulted their individuality and ability to make decisions. Adults told them what to do rather than talking with them. The failure of the converting approaches led to new prevention strategy of providing factual information about drugs or drug-specific approaches. One example of this type of program was DARE. DARE was taught by local law enforcement officers usually in the 6th grade, in conjunction with the schools. The DARE officers would come in and lecture the students about the various drugs, and often included display kits that actually had samples of the drugs on display. The programs actually did the opposite of what was intended. It heightened the curiosity and provided an increased knowledge at just about the time when the students were beginning to experiment with various drugs. The DARE program also did not provide any kind of ongoing education or counseling, so that the students were left, in effect, to ask questions of each other, or to experiment with the drugs themselves, or to listen to other sources of information about drugs and alcohol, such as the media or the music culture. In 1973, as a result of the failure of early prevention approaches, a 6-month moratorium was placed on all prevention materials developed and all prevention programs. During this time, research was being conducted on the effectiveness of prevention programs, and the research indicated that prevention programs at that time were an utter failure. In 1974, then, a 14-month prevention planning process took place, and in 1975, the Toward a National Strategy for Primary Drug Abuse Prevention report was released. The primary goal of alternative activities is to teach people that they are capable of altering their consciousness in a meaningful, longer-lasting, life-enhancing, and satisfying way that is incompatible with alcohol and drug use. Cohen emphasized that alternatives are not just substitutes for drugs, they are an integrated and valued part of the person's life. Alternative activities are effective as a prevention tool if they enhance the development of skills associated with improving one's sense of self. Consider filling out the Alternatives worksheet on page 245 in your textbook. Table 10.1. This worksheet will help you to develop a list of possible alternatives to share with others. You could use this questionnaire in conjunction with a client or a youth that you're working with, for example. Samples of positive alternatives include, for example, rock climbing, going to movies, running activities and clubs, other physical activities, maybe playing basketball, social activities and gatherings such as dances for the youth. See the upcoming Friday Night Live Reindeer Run on December 1st. Friday Night Live is the county's premier youth prevention activity club, which is available on many middle school and high school campuses. Agencies originally focused on high schools for adolescents in order to prevent drug and alcohol use. It quickly became apparent that in many cases it was already too late to provide preventive education to adolescents. The adolescents required more intervention and skill building and treatment-related approaches. As a result, alcohol and drug curricula and prevention activities shifted to kindergarten through 6th grade. A term often used in prevention programs is empowerment. Many prevention programs emphasize the empowerment of the individual. These programs are usually targeted at the general school population rather than the high-risk students who already have exhibited problem behaviors in and out of school. So how do we reduce demand? Changing knowledge levels and attitudes about substance abuse through education and other means, developing skills related to substance abuse decisions and behaviors, creating and supporting positive relationships, creating and supporting opportunities for positive activities, and changing the environment related to substance use, community norms, accessibility, and policy. Primary assumes that the individuals have never tried drugs, and you are providing education in a broad context, such as a classroom or a whole school. Secondary prevention assumes that the individuals are in the early stages of use, but do not regularly use drugs. We use prevention interventions that try to stop drug use by providing drug education, developing decision-making skills, and building refusal skills. You would provide secondary prevention interventions to a small group of children that are at risk, such as children of alcoholics. Tertiary prevention assumes that an individual is a regular user of drugs, but not a habitual user or an addict. The youth needs counseling, could be in a small group or individually, say because they are caught with marijuana on campus and was referred to the prevention program to prevent dropouts. These prevention efforts target the drug use itself, but the individual does not need treatment. In other words, tertiary prevention could be mild substance use disorder with an 8-week exploration counseling group. They may be able to curb their drug use. Now the new terms, however, are universal, selective, and indicated. Universal, selective, and indicative are in the prevention realm on the Institute of Medicine model. These interventions, as mentioned previously, are not treatment, as shown on the protractor above. So prevention activities are defined as all services provided prior to a specific diagnosis of substance use disorder. When an individual has been diagnosed with a substance use disorder, then treatment is needed and prevention is no longer effective. Selective prevention activities target the entire subgroup, regardless of the degree of risk in the group. Indicated prevention focuses on individuals who are exhibiting early signs or consequences of AOD use or problem behaviors associated with substance use, such as those who are often truant from school, for example. Low-risk youth who require low-risk intensity interventions would best be served with a universal prevention activity. Moderate risk for drug use, along with moderate risk for interventions, would best be served with a selective prevention activity. High risk for drug use, actively and regularly using drugs, but not yet an addict, would need a high intervention, such as an indicated prevention activity. According to the Center for Substance Abuse Prevention, CSAP, there are 6 main strategies for prevention activities. It is likely that you will need to employ multiple strategies to achieve your goals. You will need to use the right tools in the right combinations to make the desired changes. Alcohol and drug prevention should address itself to the needs of the community and interface with the community leaders, agencies, and the people. The predominant drugs differ from place to place and from time to time. Effective solutions to problems also vary. A plan that works now in New York City may not be applicable in San Luis Obispo. The need for local wisdom and local control is particularly pressing in solving problems. Number 2, include youth in the prevention planning and development so that the prevention activity will be attractive and meaningful for other youth. 3, a core theme in prevention is to teach young people to move from being passive to being active or proactive. Being proactive involves taking initiative, anticipating potential problems, and integrating your feelings. Proactive choices help develop the child's coping skills and ability to overcome setbacks. Number 4, prevention is a long-term strategy. The true hope is that by working with 3-year-olds and up to 10-year-olds, we will begin to break the cycle of addiction for the next generation. The number of young people who are at high risk for developing substance abuse problems is astounding. See Table 10.2 at the top of page 250 in your textbook for guidelines to making prevention programs more effective. David Hawkins, Richard Catalano, and Jeanette Miller, in their 1992 study, Risk and Protective Factors for Alcohol and Other Drug Problems in Adolescence and Early Adulthood, Implications for Substance Abuse Prevention, outlined 17 risk factors for substance abuse and the accompanying interventions. The 17 risk factors are listed on the slide. The protective factors are generally the opposite of the risk factors listed above. For example, individual characteristics, family behaviors and values, and bonding to school, as well as the values and norms of the community that can protect youth from negative outcomes. More recent research, such as that by Bonnie Bernard, has furthered the concept that positive factors deter youth from engaging in negative behaviors. Strengths and assets buffer the youth against negative health behavior. Many contributors to these prevention theories are dating back to 1950. Risk and prevention factors weaken or bolster resiliency. The risk and prevention factors theory says that while risk factors do predict substance abuse, protective factors can buffer the risk factors. Risk factors were once thought to play a stronger role in predicting poor outcome, but research now actually shows that the protective factors are more influential and are better predictors, such as in Bonnie Bernard's research in 2004. What are some examples of protective factors that buffer risk do you see in your personal and professional experience? The simple definition of resiliency by Stephen and Sybil Woolen is resiliency is an internal protective factor and the ability to bounce back. Resiliency is described by the Woolens as not getting stuck in the damage model, but instead challenging yourself and celebrating your survival and growth. Resiliency work is about reframing the damage, uncovering strength in a damage or deficit-oriented story. The definition of resiliency, according to Merriam-Webster, the dictionary, is the capability of a strained body to recover its size and shape after deformation caused especially by compressive stress. And 2, an ability to recover from or adjust easily to misfortune or change. The definition of resiliency, according to Wikipedia, is the capacity of people to cope with stress and catastrophe. And 2, characteristics of resistance to future negative events. Resiliency is an innate characteristic of all human beings. It's not a genetic trait. We all have the capacity to develop resilient traits such as social competence, problem solving, autonomy, and sense of purpose. Resiliency involves deliberations, making a plan. In many abusive family situations, it is a getaway plan, creating distance from the unhealthy situations. Instead, the Woolens describe a more positive therapeutic goal of helping patients get revenge by seeking resiliency, by living healthy, productive lives, rather than blaming and finding faults with their parents or their family. These are the 7 resiliency factors: insight, independence, relationships, initiative, creativity, humor, and morality. See the descriptions of these on pages 254 and 255 in your textbook. In 1995, Daniel Goleman, in his book Emotional Intelligence, made a case for a new kind of intelligence, an IQ that goes beyond the traditional verbal and performance scales of most IQ tests and redefines what skills make up a successful person. The key of emotional intelligence is managing anger and other moods, such as depression, fear, worry, and anxiety. The goals of emotionally intelligent individuals are optimism, motivation, perseverance, and self-efficacy. Schools, religious and voluntary organizations, the media, the private sector, law enforcement, and healthcare are the secondary line of defense against drug and alcohol abuse by young people. See the diagram. Families can make the real difference. Secondary approaches have little effect if the home and family environment are not involved and supportive of prevention efforts. Richard Fields, the author of the textbook, has found that the parents who don't need the information and are already effective parents are the ones that come to every prevention activity. The parents who need the help are either in denial, too embarrassed, or too ashamed, or too out of control themselves to attend. How could you attract the parents who really need the help get into services in the support of their youth? The Search Institute of Minneapolis has developed a research-based framework of developmental assets or factors that are critical for young people's successful growth and development. See the developmental assets information in the Files menu on the left side of Canvas under Chapter 10 under Developmental Assets. These assets are more than just nice ideas. Research on youth in hundreds of communities find that these assets are powerful influencers on behavior. Yet, the average 6th to 12th grader experiences only 18 of the 40 developmental assets. Boys average 17.2 assets, and girls average 19.9 assets. The more assets that you can expose children and youth to, the more resilient or protected they will be from future negative behavior outcomes, such as substance abuse. See the graphs on the slide for the impacts of the developmental assets on both negative and positive behaviors. For those of you working in early childhood education, these materials are really helpful and are now part of the well-researched models of successful prevention programs. Focusing on a person's strengths instead of the risks they face frames our understanding of their resiliency. What are some of the strengths? What do people learn about themselves, others, and the world? Personal qualities, traits, and virtues, talents and capabilities, ways that people help and serve others, cultural and personal traditions, pride, relationships with others, and the larger pro-social community. The best set of buffers we have against substance abuse, against depression, against violence in our children have to do with human strengths, identifying them, amplifying them, nurturing them, and getting people to lead their lives around them. This is a quote from Martin Seligman, who has a PhD. He is a leader in the field of positive psychology. So, defining deficits into strengths. Think of a deficit word that you may use to describe a youth or child. Try to come up with positive alternatives for those words, strengths, that can be used to refocus the child or the youth's behavior towards good. These prevention programs work and produce lasting results despite the facts that the youth face multiple risk factors in their communities or in their families. Connections with positive social environments, schools, families, peers, communities, and society appear to be important factors in preventing substance abuse. Figure 10.5 depicts this web of positive influence. We usually think of prevention in relation to young children, elementary children, and youth. However, prevention efforts can also focus on different age groups and special populations. Older adults are often forgotten or ignored when it comes to prevention efforts. Prevention with elders also involves proactive approaches to healthy activities that promote physical movement, interpersonal interactions, and a sense of value and worth. Prevention programs and services need to be further developed now to meet the needs of this ever-expanding population.